We have a chart here in front of us which shows several things, but I want to draw your attention to these lines right here. These are squares. They're 90 degrees apart, and if you're familiar with squares in astrology, you know that they can cause quite a bit of trouble. Specifically, we're looking at a Venus-Pluto square, and that means whatever this thing is, whoever it is, whatever kind of object it is going to have tension, or at least have some kind of effort that needs to be put into reconciling its one-to-one communications and the social pressures around it. This makes for a kind of sensuality, an investigative mind, but also an inner passion which can come out as being quite the intense personality. This individual here also has a Uranus Sun square. It's a little bit wider than you'd like to look at, it's maybe a couple of degrees, but there's something about the ego of this individual and the social talk around it. It just can't quite get it right. It's always going to, in the eyes of the public, look like it's having some trouble. Now, if this thing here wants to fix its squares, what does it do? How does it develop a better attitude? Well, I want to talk about using your signs, and I'm going to attempt to do a series on some detailed work with the signs because it's said that no astrology chart is truly bad or good. And even with the squares, though we're inclined to think that they cause problems, there are actually ways to get around those problems. I'm starting with Cancer because Cancer is related to the squares. Every time you have 90 degrees in your chart, you have an associated issue with what's going on in Cancer because they're both fourths of a circle. Okay, so Cancer is about wanting. It's in general just wanting, but typically when you consider wanting something, what it is to kind of reach for a thing that's not in front of you, the complete definition of wanting entails something that you don't have. When you want, you often recognize that you don't have something. And so stuff that has to do with Cancer or squares or fourths and all of that other stuff comes with an air of either incompleteness or dissatisfaction in the negative sense. Now, as you know, if you've looked at some of my other videos, I use duodecanates, and that means that um, at least in the sense that I use the word duodecanates, because there's another meaning associated with it, but where I use duodecanates, I divide up signs into 12 mini signs, right? So you have 12 signs in astrology, but you also have 12 sections of a sign. So the first 2.5 degrees, and we always go backwards, give you conjuncts, and they tell how you look at things. Remember, we go backwards. So the first 2.5 degrees of Cancer in this system is actually 27.5 degrees all the way to 30 degrees. The next 2.5 degree section would be 25 degrees to 27.5 degrees, and so on. Okay, so if you've got something like this particular business here, this is actually the chart of a business, you can see that it has the asteroid Laurentia in the second duodecanate of Cancer. And that means that where Laurentia tells you where you're automatically inclined to receive things for free without trying, it's just victory that comes automatically. This particular business has the ability to receive victory in its values, what it identifies against. How would that look? Well, the way it looks is that when the business as an institution makes a decision that it's going to go in a certain direction, it tends to have a really, really easy time having other things in the world reflect the direction that it's chosen. That could be good, it could be bad. It's really basically good, but in stages where the business is not stable, it would look like every time you come up with an idea, somebody else is stealing it. But in the good phases, well, I'll get to that on the next slide. This is the chart of a person. This person is this person is seen as controversial. They're not famous. This is from private data, but they have quite a reputation for going into a place and stirring it up. They are known to cause all kinds of trouble. Can you tell this from Cancer? Not quite, but if you look at the planets here, you can see that the calculated point of blessed talent here, Selene, is going backwards, right? When we go backwards, we go in this direction. And Selene is in the 1, 2, 3 duodecanate of Cancer. And that's going to be right here, how they think. They have a blessed talent for wanting to say something, wanting to express their opinion, and they typically tend to be really good at how they express their opinion. They also have their sun right here in around 14-ish degrees, 13, 14 degrees Cancer. So their ego is invested in how they show their one-to-one communication. They have a desire to express themselves in interaction through instant one-to-one communication. So we're getting the idea that this person is outspoken. And then we've got this Mercury here. You can see that Mercury, which is the planet of common ground finding, it's kind of like analysis, but basically it's reconciling things that aren't equal and trying to make them equal. That's what Mercury is about. And this person's Mercury is in projecting an impression. So when they want to show how they think about things, they tend to project an impression. This one can be really unfortunate because this is someone who speaks not so much speaks what's on their mind, but they speak the way their mind is actually working. It's kind of like a car with no shell on it. It's just, all engine and everybody can see it. And then lastly, they influence people here with their Mars. The planet of steering others is located in being talked about. And so they have an intuition for being talked about in how they steer each other, and they're emotionally in their home base in the 4th house here. Does this make for someone who's controversial? Yeah, like if they play this out by expressing their wants, then they can show a feeling of having not been listened to, and all of this stuff will just kind of flood out on people. There is a book also that has a chart, and projects and books and all that other stuff can also have signs. And let's say that you're going through this book, you can see that it's in the 10th house and the 11th house here. So this is towards the 70 or 80%, well, the 80% mark of the book. At the 80% mark of the book, the sun is there, and go figure that the main premise of this book actually comes out at the 80% mark. Anyway, the point is that if you want to activate your cancers, or you want to be able to fix something that's going on in Cancer, then not only do you look at the generic sign, but you can look at the duodecanate here for details on what that sign is about. But this is more of a negative manifestation of Cancer. The positive manifestation of Cancer is not wanting something that you don't have, but having an intuition towards something. This is where you kind of get a feeling that something should happen. Wanting and intuition are actually related. It's just that when you want something, you are saying, man, I have a lack here. I have to solve this problem. And basically, want often is associated with the declaration of a problem. If you don't want your wants to be associated with declared problems, then what you say instead is, man, I have an intuition towards this thing. Let me keep my eyes open for discovering where it's already active. Instead of reaching for something you don't have, you keep your eyes open for some version of a related thing that you do have. And that's what intuition is. It's keeping your eyes open. There's a version, for example, of this person's chart in which she's just a really, really good nurturer. She has an intuition for how people need to be steered in the masses. And I've actually seen her in action. She's really good. She can actually corral people and get them to move. And she has an ability to problem solve on a wide range and basically gather people together and keep them organized. This is all very true. The positive version of Cancer is, instead of saying, I want this, I want that, I'm dissatisfied with this, what you end up saying is, I have an inclination towards this particular feeling, and here's what I observe. And then you act on what you've already observed, something that's already there. That's the big deal. Turns out that the chart we looked at the very beginning of this presentation here is the chart of China. You can see that regardless of how China presents itself or what it tries to do, it's inclined to just be viewed mysteriously because China, as an ego nation, is in square with its Uranus. And the Uranus is how everybody else, every country, all the people who look at China talk about it. And so there's this sense that even though China may be progressing or doing whatever, there's still this sense that other folks just have their eye on it. Like, you look at China with the side eye, maybe for no reason at all. I mean, you think about Japan trying to take over China during the early world wars. It's like, what did China ever do to you? People just have a tendency to want to look at China and say, I don't know, it's the sleeping dragon. One day it's going to eat us. And yeah, you see that in its chart as far as social talk versus the ego of the country is concerned. Internally, however, there's this social pressure here, and there's a tendency with that Mars there, not quite involved with the square, there's a tendency to want to impose that social pressure on discontent, and it just can't quite socialize right when it does it. Uh, it's hard for nations to express intuition, but not necessarily impossible. You can actually have some kind of media or social program or home program or domesticity related program that can play this out more positively. The moral of the story is that when you're using Cancer, you're affecting all of your squares and all of your level nines. I talk about level nines in my books, so particularly the second and the third book, HBS and all 144 aspects, especially all 144 aspects. But if you're not familiar with that, don't worry about it. The point is that if you want to fix your squares, you need to fix what's going on in Cancer, and that involves intuition instead of just wanting.